Hi, I'm an old guy and I do maths. And today we're looking at reducing balance depreciation, which is one of the three types of depreciation that people generally study, whether it's for financial maths, accounting, or whatever. Now, those of you who do physics might recognize this as a decay graph, and that's essentially what it is. Some of the symbols are different, but the effect is the same. So let's get into this and just explain what's going on here. So this is the graph of the value of an asset as it depreciates over time using the reducing balance method. And that method involves taking a percentage of the value of the asset at this time, this time, this time, this time, and so forth, and subtracting that from what we call the book value. So this axis here, the y-axis, gives us the book value, and it's usually denoted in dollars or pounds or yen or whatever currency you're using. And this axis here, the x-axis, is time, usually years. But it can differ. And what happens is the asset is purchased at a particular price. In the first year it's depreciated by a percentage of that price to get to this value. In the following year it's depreciated by a percentage of this value to get to this value, and so on, until it reaches an agreed value, which might be the scrap value, or until it gets so close to zero that it's not funny. The nature of this graph is that it never actually hits zero. It'll get down to a few cents or parts of cents if you go long enough at this, but essentially it won't hit the x-axis. And there are all sorts of mathematical reasons for that, which are unimportant in the general scheme of this. So this is what the graph looks like. It looks like this because different amounts are taken off each year. So let's just have a look at how that works. So I've got some examples here, and I want you to imagine that you have an asset that you purchase for $1,000, and in the first year you remove 10% of the value of that as depreciation. You lower its value by means of depreciation by 10%, which is $100. So if it were $1,000 here, it would be $900 here. In the second year, so this is the value at the end of 1 year. In the second year, you take this value here and you take 10% off it, which is $90, resulting in a value of $810, which would be this value here. So forth and so on. This time you take $81 off, which is 10% of that. You wind up with $729, which is this value here. And as you go on and on and on, these numbers get smaller and smaller and smaller, as does this value here. But the gaps between these values get smaller. The gaps are these values. And so hopefully you can see that the amount of depreciation that you take off after a long number of years is going to be quite small, and so these numbers will change not very much, and you can see that is why this graph flattens out. But the difference in values here is why this graph has a curve. Now, is there a shorter way of calculating reducing balance depreciation, or the book value of an asset using that method, other than going through this laborious process year after year? Well, yes, there is, and here it is. The book value is equal to the cost times 1 minus R, if R is the percentage divided by 100. So say 10%, that would be 10 over 100, which would be 0.1. So this value here might be, let's say, $1,000 times 1 minus 0.1, which is effectively 0.9. And n is the number of years that you want to do this calculation for. So if we just did it for 1 year, it would be 1,000 times 0.9 to the power of 1, 1,000 times 0.9, which would give us $900. If we did it for 2 years, this number would be 2, and we would get 810. And if you needed to work out the accumulated depreciation, which would be that plus that, over those 2 years, all you have to do is find the difference between this value and that value. Okay, so that's a very quick introduction to reducing balance depreciation. There are some examples in the playlists of this in action. When is it used? Quite often it's used for motor vehicles because most of the depreciation occurs in the first few years. It's usually not used for productive machinery. Unit cost is used for that. And very often what method you actually get to use is decided A, by your textbook, or B, because this is something that gets used around tax time. It's usually decided by the tax authorities as to which method you use. But if you're doing this academically, it's decided by the textbook or your examiner. Okay, I hope that was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.